Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Leigh Fuge, and in this video today we're going to be talking about this really cool reverb pedal from the guys at JPTR FX. This is the Kaleidoscope. JPTR FX are a German-based pedal building company run by a guy called Chris JPTR. I first met Chris at the 42 Gear Street event at Henning Pauli's studio back in August this year, and he very kindly gave me this pedal, the Kaleidoscope, to take away and make some videos with. This is a crazy reverb pedal, probably the craziest reverb pedal I've ever heard, and I'm probably going to say the craziest one I probably ever will hear. And the reason for that is in its design. So on the surface, it's sort of a spring reverb, but there's a couple of things going on under the hood that make it very interesting. So first of all, we've got this master volume control here, which controls the overall volume of the reverb. But we've also got this gain and compression dial here. Now, Chris explained this to me as being kind of like a Fender Twin. So when you crank a Fender Twin and you get that natural preamp distortion, this gain and compression knob here sort of simulates speaker saturation after the reverb. So if you cranked an old Fender Twin, you'd have the reverb circuit, which would then hit the speaker, and obviously the volume of the amp would cause the speaker to break up. So you can almost dial in like a fuzz kind of vibe here. It's not a full-on fuzz, but it's sort of like a fuzzy speaker distortion sound. So it's really cool because you can get these very interesting textured reverb sounds. It's also got a bunch of cool sort of oscillation features because we've got the standard bypass, which turns the pedal on and off. We've got a kill switch, which actually cuts the dry signal. So if you're using this in like a wet-dry setup, you could use this button here to have only the reverb tails come out of this. So that would be really interesting for running in a stereo rig. And then you've got a hold switch, which sort of does this feedback self-oscillation kind of thing. We hold this down and it goes a bit crazy. That's a lot of fun as well. That is controlled by these three knobs here. The first of which is the reverb volume. So this is like the overall amount of reverb you're getting in the signal. Then we've got the swell amount. So this kind of controls how much the effect swells and moves around when you put it in conjunction with the hold switch. And then we've also got the feedback on the top as well. What's really interesting is the reverb tails are almost slightly modulated, kind of like a chorus, but not quite a chorus. It's very good for ambient sort of swirly reverb sounds, but if you use it very subtly, you can get some really cool amp-like spring reverb tones as well. So it's really cool. Chris said he based this idea off like a 60s sort of tone where you've got that big spring reverb in the amp, the speaker breakup, and then you can go a bit crazy as well if you want. It wouldn't be a JPTR pedal if it didn't have something pretty crazy under the hood. So the more of the feedback you introduce into the signal, the more sort of wobbly and unpredictable the signal becomes. It does a lot of self-oscillation, which is cool. It's one of those pedals that you really have to find the sweet spots when you dial it into your rig, because if you use this wrong, it can kind of go off and do its own thing, which is part of the challenge and part of the fun of using something like this, is that it is slightly unpredictable. On some of the more subtle settings, like I said, you can get a real cool amp-like spring reverb, but you can also push that up just a little bit and get this cool 80s modulated reverb. Like I said, it sort of sounds like a reverb with a chorus applied to the reverb tail or something like that. And then the compression and gain knob actually sits after the reverb circuit. So this is actually the last thing you hear before it hits the amp. So if you leave that on 0 or just very subtly up, you get like a sort of a clean reverb, maybe with a hint of breakup. And the higher you push that, the more compressed and saturated the reverb actually coming out of the unit gets. And also with this pushed all the way up, because it also acts as compression, like an amp would compress if you pushed it, it actually increases the volume of the lower things going on. So if you've got a reverb tail that's tailing off, it actually boosts the volume of that, so the reverb tails actually get enhanced and lengthened by keeping this compression and gain knob running full as well. The Kaleidoscope, like all of the other JPTR products, are handmade by Chris and his very small team in their workshop in the north of Germany. This retails at 199 euros. So for a handmade pedal by a small boutique company that does so many crazy things, it's a pretty good bargain. These are really well put together, and I really like the aesthetic of the pedal. It's got this kind of raw metal casing with the printed on design on the top. All of Chris's pedals follow this black and silver aesthetic, which is really cool. It's very kind of industrial and rough and ready, and it's the sort of thing you wouldn't mind bashing up if you took it out for a gig. It's not like you're spending, you know, 350, 400 pounds on a pedal that you're going to be afraid to take out of the house. You wouldn't be afraid to beat this thing up at a gig, and if anything, it would probably look even cooler after it's been through the walls a little bit. So it's a very, very cool pedal. It runs off a standard 9-volt jack. It's got an in and out on the back, everything you'd expect. And it's got a pair of white LEDs which are super, super bright. So you would never, ever miss this thing on a stage. When I first saw the pedal from the front, I was kind of worried that the 3-foot switches might be slightly close together, especially with the middle one being a hold function. But if you look at the pedal straight on, you can actually see the middle one is slightly raised, and it's actually a soft switch, whereas these two are the harder style sort of click switches. The hold switch is actually a soft touch switch. So actually it's quite easy to use because it's raised. You can just press that down and you don't actually come anywhere near the other switches. So I think we should plug this thing in now and get some sounds out of it. It's a lot of fun. For this video, I'm going to be using my Shergold Masquerader, which is plugged into the Blackstar Studio 10 6L6, which is mic'd up with a Lewitt Audio LCT 440 condenser mic. So we'll start off looking at some real subtle tones. So as you can see here, I've got the master volume on full. The gain is just fractionally up. It's like sort of 1 or 2 notches above where 0 would be. Likewise, the reverb amount here is the same. That's sort of 1 notch above 0. And I've got the swell and feedback controls both completely off. So you can hear there's a slight modulation to the tail there. If I push up the oscillation, or the swell amount I should say, and the feedback, this is where we start to get into some sort of chorusy sounding reverb tails. You can actually hear a little bit of a bounce on the delay tail, almost like an echo. So let's push the feedback up a little bit more to halfway, a bit more oscillation. Let's actually move the gain a little bit as well. It's a big reverb sound. There's a lot going on in the tail there. So I'm going to start moving this again. Let's add a bit more of the reverb volume now. So we're going to get deeper, lusher, sort of fuller reverb. So you can hear the pedal there actually starts to go into its own kind of self-oscillation thing. So I'm going to back off the feedback control and the sort of the sweep control a little bit there, push the reverb volume a little bit higher. So we're sort of 60–70% of the way up now. So as you can see there, there's a ton of really crazy, wacky sounds in there. Now, I was saying earlier that I use it in a very subtle way, so I'm just going to set it back to what I use it for. It works really well as a spring type reverb. So I've got my Analog Man King of Tone here. I would use this in a sort of full pedal board situation as just, like I said, a spring reverb. So if I hit this with a little bit of overdrive, I run the reverb on here pretty clean. I just have it up just one notch just for a little bit of a volume boost more than anything. So here's how it sounds with a bit of overdrive hitting the front. So it works really well as a sort of subtle reverb to hit with a little bit of overdrive from your own pedal board, or you can use the internal gain on this thing to really go crazy. Obviously when you're hitting it with your own gain circuit, you have to be careful of how you dial it, because obviously it can get a little bit wilder. Just to give you an example, I'll push up the sort of the feedback and the oscillation. I'll push everything up a little bit actually, just to give you a bit of an idea of what happens when you hit it with gain. So obviously if you go any higher than that with some of the settings on the pedal, you're going to end up with even more weird oscillations and crazy stuff, but it's a lot of fun. If you want to create some really insane reverb textures, that pedal has got so much to offer. And even if you just want a subtle spring reverb that's a little bit different to the norm, again, the Kaleidoscope wins hands down. So all in all, it's a fantastically built pedal. It's got a ton of really cool, really useful sounds in there, and also a bunch of sounds that maybe aren't that useful, but they're a lot of fun. Some of the more extreme oscillation settings probably aren't going to be used by day-to-day players like myself. I play mostly blues-based stuff, so I'm not really going to need that many of the, you know, the wild things this thing can do. But I really like to have it as an option. If I ever want to throw that in for some reason, it's there as an option. But even just as a standalone, subtle spring reverb kind of thing, I love it. I love the tones of it. I love the way it reacts with my setup, with my guitars. For me, it's a winner, and I even quite like that modulated reverb. So if I'm playing anything kind of 80s-ish, I'll dial in that reverb that sounds slightly chorusy. It's a lot of fun as well. There's a lot of cool tones to be had there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to go check out Jupiter FX. Their website is linked down below in the description. Go give those guys some love. They make some insane products. Go check them out. There's some really cool stuff. Chris Jupiter is a mad scientist at work. He's coming up with all sorts of cool things. And if you guys did enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because you guys subscribing to the channel really helps me to keep on growing the channel. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think of this down below in the comments. Let me know what you think, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Thanks for watching.